Today, I am headed to the airport and then to Houston, Texas, because 9 days from today, a man is going to be executed. I looked up survival in the dictionary, and one of the definitions is to keep your body and your soul together. Well, in about 9 days, 8 days, March 19th, this young man's body and soul are going to come to a parting of the ways. And we are there to speak to him, to learn some life lessons from his impending death. And so we are going to talk to this young man about the journey of his soul. One of the things that we've been talking about with this shoot, Iyama and I have been talking about, along with the entire team of producers and crew, that this is not a story about crime and punishment. This is a story about choices and consequences. We all make choices every single day, and every single choice we make carries with it energy. And energy has consequences. You put your energy in one thing, you get a result. You put your energy in another thing, you get a different result. Energy has consequences. Life is about choice and consequences. And the soul's journey continues even when the body's journey ends. So we're traveling to Houston, Texas to raise those questions, to raise those ideas with a man who is going to be executed in 8 or 9 days. That's what this story is about. As the clock ticks down on your earthly life, how much thought have you given to your soul and your spirit?
Let me tell you a story. He was born on August 25th, 1980 in the San Francisco Bay Area, and he moved to the state of Texas as a young boy. He stopped going to school regularly at age 11 after a close friend of his died. When he was 15, he stole a bicycle. Some of you might be able to relate to that. He was later expelled from school for possession of marijuana, and he was sent to an alternative school. At 16, he stopped going to that alternative school, and sometime after that, he was expelled from the alternative school. And that was the last school he would ever attend. This young man eventually attempted a residential burglary and attacked an off-duty police officer who attempted to detain him. This young man soon became a father to a daughter, and he and his baby mama came to live in his parents' home in November of 1998. And on November 21st of that year, 1998, this young man that I have been talking about, he purchased a number of very large bags from a store called the Academy Store. And on November 23rd, he assaulted an off-duty policeman. And the following day, he was arrested for that assault. And on November 29th of that year, 1998, this young man, he was by now 18 years old. This 18-year-old young man had created his own record label and had his own rap group. And on that day, Sunday, November 29th, 1998, this 18-year-old young man recruited 2 other men to accompany him to a recording studio in San Antonio, Texas. The 3 men entered the recording studio, and this young man walked up behind the 33-year-old owner of that studio, who was also a recording engineer there. This young man walked up behind that 33-year-old studio owner, grabbed him by the hair, and slit his throat. The 2 recruits accompanying this young man then proceeded to stab the recording engineer 25 times, resulting in his death. Now, the ringleader, the 18-year-old man I've been talking about, then covered the 33-year-old victim with a black sheet in order to, in his words, quote, not have to look at him, end quote. And then this young man, along with his 2 accomplices, began loading vehicles with the equipment inside the studio, estimated to be worth between $10,000 and $30,000. And after making several trips back and forth to their vehicles, loading their stolen property, this young man and his 2 accomplices were spotted by police officers who observed the 3 men engaging in what appeared to be suspicious activity. A few days later, on December 1st, police arrested one of the 2 recruits and charged him with capital murder. And a warrant was issued for the ringleader, the 18-year-old man I've been talking about. The following day, on December 2nd, our 18-year-old confessed to police that he planned the crime and recruited 2 accomplices. And 1 year later, on January 18th, 2000, our now 19-year-old young man was convicted for the murder of the 33-year-old recording engineer and studio owner. And 2 days later, on January 20th, 2000, our 19-year-old young man was sentenced to death. This young man's name was Ray Jasper, and the man Ray Jasper murdered was named David Alejandro. In addition to owning the recording studio and being a music engineer at the facility, David Alejandro was also a well-known musician, and he sang in a local band called The Max, which had been a regional favorite for some 18 years at that time. Ray Jasper's 2 recruits, his co-conspirators in the robbery and murder, one pled guilty in exchange for a life sentence, and the other was convicted at trial and also sentenced to life in prison. 8 years later, on September 5th, 2008, Ray Jasper filed an appeal in Texas, Western District Court. And nearly 3 years after that, on February 2nd, 2011, he filed a habeas corpus lawsuit challenging the death penalty. Well, a year later, on December 10th, 2012, in the U.S. Court of Appeals in New Orleans, Ray Jasper lost his bid to have his death sentence overturned. And on Wednesday, March 12th, 2014, as part of the producing team for a show I was working on at the time, I flew from my home in Maryland to Houston, Texas, and drove from there to the Allen B. Polunsky unit in Polk County in West Livingston, Texas, where that state houses its male death row inmates. And we were there to sit down with Ray Jasper for what would probably be the last interview he would ever give. And 1 week later, on Wednesday, March 19th, 2014, at the Texas State Penitentiary at Huntsville, Ray Jasper was executed by lethal injection. And among his last words, Ray Jasper quietly asked his family to, quote, take care of each other, stay strong and faithful to God, end quote. He also told his daughter that he loved her, adding that she, quote, be strong, be positive, have a great life, end quote. Can you imagine a father knowing he's about to die, telling his daughter to have a great life? Witnesses to the execution reported that Mr. Jasper then asked that the, quote, Lord God Almighty in heaven, Jesus Christ, see my spirit, end quote, see my spirit.
I can't even begin to tell you, I'm still processing what that experience has done in my soul. And when we walked in, there are these little stalls as big as a phone booth that you would see back in the day on the corner. And we walked in and he was standing in his, number 27, waiting for us. They had already brought him in. And he was just standing there waiting. So we tucked the Yanla around the corner so he couldn't see her until we were ready to start. We had 1 hour to talk to this gentleman. So I went and picked up the phone. He was behind the glass. I picked up the phone and introduced myself and told him I was one of the producers and I would be working with the Yanla through this hour, passing her notes and sharing thoughts with her as she engaged in the conversation with him. And he said, okay. Very soft-spoken young man. And we did the interview. And when the interview was over, we were packing up, about to leave, and he taps on the glass and motions for the cameraman to get me. And I went over to Ray, and I picked up the phone again, and I'm looking into his eyes, he's looking into mine, and he says, when is this going to air? And I said, probably April. And when I said that, I knew that unless there was a stay of execution, that this brother wouldn't be here in April. He wouldn't even be here 7 days later. And I said, April. And he smiled, big smile. And I said, what was this experience like for you? What was this hour like for you? And he said, it was a blessing. And he smiled again. And then I said, thank you. And we hung up the phone and we all left. It is very eerie to look into the eyes of someone that you know is not long for this world. Very eerie to talk to somebody about the fact that they are not long for this world. And he made it very clear that I do not go into this willingly. I am being executed. It was deep on so many different levels.